So we will move on to the Atlas Waterfront Project update. We have Phil Boyd with Welch Comer.
So tonight, I am going to give you an update on the Atlas project. City Administrator Tymason asked me at the end of the public meeting when we were standing out in the cold and the rain, discussing the meeting. He said, gosh, it would be good if you came to City Council and gave a little bit of an update in advance of our meetings next week. So that if Council has any specific questions tonight, we can try to respond to them between now and then. So the meeting was at the arena, at the Frontier Ice Arena. Council member Miller, Hillary Anderson, and their crew at 2030 did a great job running the show. There was about, I think, 150 people there, and it was well attended. The objective of that meeting was to take the data we had received from Councilmember Miller and Hillary Anderson's prior Core Vision Group meeting that was held here on February 7th, where they had presented a list of questions to the community organization representatives, and they had provided feedback, which was really quite helpful to my team. We took that information and just envisioned the old funnel, started very broadly, and moved down and continued to focus the effort, and that's where we're moving forward. The objective at the March 22nd meeting at the ICE Arena was to demonstrate that to the public, provide them some information just about how we are shaping the development and the economic balance that's necessary, and I'll describe that here in a little bit. We also wanted to present some very conceptual options on road networks, public space size and character, and then the shoreline restoration, and then we had an open house where we solicited feedback. So I'm going to walk through some of the slides that we presented there. This is the Reader's Digest version. As I go, Mr. Mayor, if it's appropriate for the council, I'm glad to field questions as we move along. One of the things we wanted to start with is presenting the density, the surrounding land density, to put the parcel, the 47-acre parcel, in context. And so we put this up. This is actual land density. It is not a zoning density necessarily, except for the vacant Douglas piece to the west, which we've shown that as 17 to 34 units an acre, because that appears that might be what it's headed to. So we just wanted to give the community an idea of what the surrounding density was like. The other important feature we wanted to express, and there's a couple of different ways that we tried to do this, is that there is a trade-off between public space and private space. Obviously, the private space will fund the purchase of the public space and the development of that public space. And so the easy answer is, gosh, city, let's buy it and make the whole thing a park. That's probably not in the city's financial model. And so we were trying to express that as a balance. As you add public acreage, you need to add private acreage. As you add features to the public space, you need to increase density into the private space. As you add more acreage and features to the public space, you have to increase the intensity. So if you think density is kind of horizontal and intensity is vertical. So now we're trying to demonstrate these trade-offs. If that's not sufficient on the private side, which it won't be, there will likely be some city or Ignite funds to move the development along, and potentially a general obligation bond. And again, this was just a device to try to help the folks understand that there are trade-offs with this. This is just another visual device, simple graph. As you can see on the y-axis, towards the bottom, it's lightly developed single-family homes. Towards the top, it's more intensely developed with multifamily housing. And on the x-axis, towards the left, it's very simply developed park, and towards the right, it's a very developed park. And those are the trade-offs we're trying to express to them. And part of this is a presentation, so when they get ready to go to the open house, they can, with some knowledge, provide us feedback.
Phil, is that a trade-off or is that a relationship?
Relationship, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. So we presented them. There was like I said, I'm giving you the Reader's Digest version because some of the council members, maybe all of you were there. I ran into several of you there. The information we're providing them were about road network type, public space, size and character, riverbank restoration options, and we gave them, again, this is Kiki Miller's favorite device, which we use frequently too, is the stoplight, red, yellow, and green, most preferred, least preferred. These are the summary slides, and on the left, you can see the different options that we presented to the community, the road network in this case, we showed them a grid, a meandering with a grid, and then a meandering, described to them the different merits of each one of those in pretty good detail during the presentation part. And then we showed them this slide and asked them during the open house to provide their opinion. And pretty stark contrast here. You see no one's really interested in a grid. And we even I gave the foregrounds as an example, and I love the foregrounds. And, but they seem to focus on a meandering street network, which is a theme that we kind of heard throughout, that the expression of this site is more natural, open, and kind of a comfortable feeling, not a congested space, although you'll see a counter argument to that a little bit later. This was the one that didn't surprise us too much. What size of public space do you prefer, considering the funding trade-offs? And there's a lot of information on this slide, but the first one is the development area, the road area, and the public space area. And you can see option 1 has small public area, option 3 has big public area. The trade-off is when you have a small public area, you can have single-family home housing, less dense. As you go to a more public area, you need higher density and higher intensity. Surprisingly, when you look at options 2 and 3, option 2 really didn't have any no votes, but option 3 had quite a bit of positive votes. This actually follows on from the initial meeting that Councilmember Miller had here on February 7th, and one of the questions that her and Hillary had put together was, would you accept higher density for improved public space? And that received a very high vote. So I think, again, we're kind of hearing from the community is more public space, more intensely developed public space. They're willing to trade that off with some higher density.
Quickly, Phil, can I interrupt you really quickly? As you go through this, can we remind council and the public that this presentation are the results of that last meeting, and they are online, so if viewers are watching this, they don't have to memorize these. Those slides are on the city's website.
Yes.
And they can review them later, so.
Yes, which is, and again, Councilmember Miller and Hillary deserve a lot of credit, because that's a really great resource. I use it myself, even though I have this information on my server. It's very convenient. The types of public space character, again, you can see that it was pretty much supported that they want something more developed, not as simple as you see here. This trail picture that you see here, some of the comments received is that's not very nice, and folks like this. You'll notice down here in option 3 that there's a tremendous number of red votes. And even though during the presentation, and I was competing with some of the people that were in that arena because it was fairly loud in there, we were trying to explain to the community that there is an option to have a transient set of boater docks on the river. And transient means you pull in for a couple hours, go up, have a cup of coffee or lunch, and get back in your boat and leave. It's
You have to
not
move
a
your
mooring
boat 300
facility.
feet?
Pardon me?
No.
Oh, yeah, that's it. So, but I don't know that this picture did it justice, and folks were commenting at the open house, I don't have money to afford a boat parking spot. And we kept trying to re-educate and say, that wasn't the intent of this. It's a transient facility. I think we will reintroduce this concept at the meeting next week and do a better job of explaining it. Because as you can imagine, from a commercial perspective, as we evaluate options for commercial development in that site, especially ones near the water, having the opportunity to have boaters come in the summer is a whole other revenue stream. And if I were someone that was purchasing commercial property, I would think that would be I know it would be an important feature there, because we've heard it from some of the developers we've spoken with. And then in the shoreline restoration category, there's really 3 types of shoreline out there. I think all of you have probably been on the site. There's some very tall shoreline on the west, and as you move towards the east, it drops off considerably. And considering how we would stabilize that shoreline from the boat wakes, because as you all know, you can go through there very fast, and there's very wide wakes in there. or high wakes in there. We gave them 3 different options. You can see that the riprap option did not resonate at all. These 2 options were favorably responded to. This option that shows the retaining wall and the shoreline here, again, some of the picture, the imagery we selected, that is an option, but one of the comments we heard back is, oh, that's really neat. I can walk along the shoreline next to this retaining wall, which might be the case, but it's not exactly the case in some of those areas because the water goes right up to the bottom of the bank. So in our next meeting, we'll select a different image to gauge our feedback. In the mid-height areas, you can see here that the riprap, again, didn't receive any. The options of being able to get down to the water were very favorably responded to. And so kind of think Independence Point or amphitheater type. These obviously involve more capital expenditures to create that, but it's also wonderful public space. And then in the low riverbank areas, we believe that there's an opportunity to create a beach area in there. Looking back at some of the historical photographs and some of the topographic information we've looked at there, it might be an opportunity to restore the beach or do some low access opportunities there where you can get right off of a plaza and into the water. And again, you can see which ones are most favorably responded to there. So those were the kind of the second level, we'll call them, concepts we boiled down. We've got that feedback. We're starting to use that to further refine the concepts and so and focus them. And so what you'll see next week are more fully developed concept. We'll actually have some pretty good detail on the public space, some good detail on modeling and imagery of what the private space and the road networks might look like and be developed to, and an additional economic analysis and real estate information. And that meeting is happening next week on the 25th in this very room. And then there's the city council workshop on the 26th.
Phil, what time on the 25th?
The 5:30 to 7:30.
The 5:30, okay, there you go.
Yes.
Phil, I have a couple questions for you. So these concepts that you put out there, some of the votes are not all one-sided. I mean, first off, it's 150 people making the wish list. So when you look at that, does the winner always win? Is that what it's going to be, or does it spin again?
It spins again, and I think at the end of the day, what we're after is a general direction. I would say officially, the final decision is actually made here. And I think that the council will end up with some fairly challenging decisions. And maybe the most challenge will be, gosh, the community wants all this public space, and they want all this development in it along the waterfront. And based on our economic models and working with Ignite, you may need to float an X number of $1 million general obligation bond. Or you do this other thing and don't do a general obligation bond. And so those are some of the decisions. So I would accept them as general guidance. And you do enough of this, and when you interact with the community, you get a pretty good feel. But we do recognize it is 150 people, and you all represent many thousand more than that.
Do you put this type out there on the web for people that can't make the meetings to be able to vote and put their little sticker on things, or do you not?
We haven't done that, and we've discussed it a little bit. Councilmember Miller and Hillary and I have discussed that. But sometimes it's difficult to put imagery up without the context, the presentation, and then folks look at it and they may not understand some of the relationships, as Councilmember Gookin said.
I guess, the reality is you go to all this effort to reach out, and 150 people that are real interested in it show up. It's similar to what happened here in McEwen. And then as we get rolling, we have to hear that, oh, I wasn't involved, I didn't know. And I get it, and that's part of this process, but I appreciate what you guys are doing. It's an interesting approach to it, these choices, kind of like this, kind of like that. So I look forward to more of this. Thanks.
I'm glad you brought that up. I just wanted to jump in real quickly. With this project, and I've been involved, my name's been mentioned a lot, been involved since the very beginning of putting this outreach together. And this core vision group isn't core as in center. It was community organization representatives. So the initial outreach went to thousands and thousands of people through the organizations that they belong to by having all of this sent out and having those organizations send one representative to represent their view. We've reached out again to all of those organizations to invite them to these meetings and to stay tuned about what's going on online. They've also been submitting comment cards and information. We're posting all of that online as well. So it might feel like 150 people, but I think it's in the thousands and thousands of touches at this point. And there's still more information being put out there and multiple ways for people to connect and be involved in this rather than just that one thing. Second to that, the consultants that were hired by Ignite are professionals in analyzing and taking this data and feeding it back and giving us good data to make decisions for those people who are counting on us to do that. Our conversations surrounding surveys and how we do anything of that is based on the fact that we need to be able to provide information back to the consultants so that they can give us a proper presentation. So that's kind of where that conversation has gone, and I just encourage everyone to, review this PowerPoint. Possibly we can have Jeff pull this out and get it on the website so they can see what Phil presented tonight. And the 25th meeting is very important for the public. It's very important for us to have as many people there as possible and weigh in.
Thanks.
Little comment about the public meeting on the 25th is it will be a presentation in an open house. And then afterwards, at that same time, we're going to have a community Q&A and discussion, and that'll give opportunity for folks in the audience to ask a question, and Councilmember Miller and Hillary will be synthesizing those questions and helping folks formulate them so we can kind of move through in a business-like way. But we wanted to be able to have, as we talked about it, we thought it was important to give the opportunity for that dialogue to occur between the consulting team and get questions out of the community. Why didn't you think of this, or why aren't you doing that?
And, the results of that meeting are intended to be posted onto the website the following day.
Right.
So it'll be public immediately as close as we can in real time.
Any other questions for Phil? All right, thank you very
Thank you,
much,
Mayor.
appreciate it.
Thank you.